By using the fourth generation of virtual reality, a lot of works have been produced by using the full sensory projection method. The only reason the work has become popular, even though it is not a trendy game, is because of the game's representation of a fantasy world and reality. As soon as he entered the virtual reality world, he was met with a vast land which was full of grass as far as the eye could see. Soon after, the next thing he sensed was the smell of the earth that the wind carried with it, a feeling of excitement rushing through him as he looks onto the horizon with excitement. He runs ahead as he yells out that his adventure starts to build their dream nation. Years later, he stands there above the ground, marveling down his empire with his soldiers preparing to fight to death to protect him and his empire. He exclaims how spectacular the sight before him is. He is the king of Alchimera, King Hellion. After a lot of trial and error, his empire has grown to become a superpower, and it is finally time for the celebrations where they mark the 150 years of founding the country. Even though he's a human behind this empire, but the NPCs are all non-humans, he feels moved because he can see the results of all the hard work he has done so far. The orcs wanted to fight him and his soldiers during the national celebrations, and they even went through a lot of trouble to pick a fight, but then they quickly surrendered before they could even fight properly. Because of this, Hellion feels a bit incomplete. He walks back to his room and starts counting down to 1, expecting for someone to arrive and come inside the room. As soon as he is done counting down, the door opens to reveal a fox girl entering, and she tells him that the preparation for the national celebrations have been completed and tells him to come to the platform. He nods as he thanks her for informing him and uses the keywords for players to communicate with the NPCs to tell her to follow him to the platform. He looks at her for a while and smiles as he thinks how Reeve, the fox girl, is one of the 3 NPCs that he got from Gacha in the early days when he started playing the game, and she was just a low-ranked species at first, and the second one was also a low-ranked demon cat, and the third one was a rare species of elf. The 3 of them are now commanders of the first 3 corps of the nation, which are his strongest army. Along with all the other NPCs, he has the strongest of them command the 8 Grand Courts of Alchimera. He gets teary-eyed when he thinks about how far they have come because he personally trained and raised them with care to make them first-class soldiers. Maybe it's the celebratory air, but he starts to feel a bit sentimental about how far they have come, and he has yet to prepare a speech for this year's celebrations, but no matter what he says, it won't affect anything. He lays back to close his eyes and rest for a bit, but suddenly opens his eyes as he feels a powerful tremor, and gets surprised as he falls down due to the shakiness. He gets a hold of himself and looks up to see what the tremor was about and wonders if it was a bug in the game or maybe a natural disaster event happening. Reeve immediately shows up next to him and asks him if he is hurt in any way or not. He tells her that he seems to be fine and immediately opens up the player interface to see when he looks to his empire. He sees a vast forest and exclaims what happened to the old terrain. Since the kingdom is still standing, it does not seem to be a natural disaster event. He wonders if it is the terrain interfering great magic. The 3rd and 4th courts are stationed in the capital. He orders Ryu to return to the office immediately, and he runs to the ball in the middle of the room and tries to gain access to the nearest base and commander. The communication ball fails to respond and asks it to open the map. He sees a projection of map of the Empire that opens up and sees that there is no base whatsoever. It seems like the whole area outside of the capital is filled with gray, which means is unexplored area. He wonders in disbelief whether it is a forced transfer of some sort, and maybe they were sent here to explore the new area. Forced transfers are those events that occur rarely, but he has never heard of a case where an entire capital is transferred. He thinks the notorious game company is up to mischievous stuff again, and the engineers for the game are famous for their bad sense, and they can do anything to mess with their players if they want. Reeves calls out to him in distraught, and he looks back in confusion to see whether it could a fear anomaly, even though Reeves is a character of braveness. He exclaims to her that it seems like the capital of their empire has been forced to transfer and tells her to figure out the current state of the kingdom. Reeves only has a dumbstruck look her face as if she does not know what to do. He tells her that he will send minimum instructions to each commander, and she should also contact the other commanders and try to collect as much information as she can. She salutes him while stuttering and leaves the room to work on the task she has been assigned. He is able to contact his commanders and orders them that they have been met with an emergency situation and tells the 1st Division to continue supporting him as his assistant as usual. 2nd Division should check the safety of citizens, and the 3rd Division should treat the wounded and inspect the barrier around the capital. The 4th Division should investigate the nearby area. The 5th should help the 2nd Division. 6th with the 4th and the 7th Division should check and repair all the facilities. The 8th Division is told to check the perimeter from the sky and monitor the surroundings. They are all ordered not to do anything that will provoke the other countries, and their top priority is to understand the situation they are in right now. He sits down and waits for the reports to come in. He thinks of filing a complaint if the event is really bad that ruined their celebration event. He decides to check what the other kings think about what is happening right now, and when he checks the user interface, he sees that no one else is online except for him. Suddenly, the door is knocked on and he gets shocked as he tells them to enter. Slowly, the door opens up to reveal a disheveled Reeve with her ears downward, as if she is petrified and scared down to her bones. She tells him that she has a report on the current situation. The capital is completely surrounded by the forest, and according to the 6th Division, the forest has some kind of illusionary effect, so it is difficult to confirm further. He thinks for a while and says that he should form a temporary investigation team with elves at the core. Reeve exclaims that she will relay his order to the 4th Division commander. She moves on to the next report of the 8th Division. After checking from the sky, he found out that only the north direction has less dense of a forest, but it is difficult to confirm anything further from within the capital's barriers. She starts to blabber on, but Hellion stops her before continuing and says that he did not use any keywords to talk to her just now, and when she asks what a keyword is, he gets surprised that she can hear him say the things without the keywords. He exclaims that he was just talking to himself, yet she is still responding to him. Reeve is shocked as she asks with concern whether she said something unnecessary, and Hellion is just shook and does not know how to respond to her because he is confused as to how she can understand everything he is taking out loud. He immediately scatters to call the game manager, but gets no response. He tries to calm himself first, and Reeve asks him if there is a problem that he needs help with because he is definitely freaking out and panicking. She reaches in and touches his forehead with her own. This surprises Hellion even more, and he stays there like a statue as he reaches out to touch her face. Before, the players could feel the 5 senses, but right now he could definitely feel her breath, which is weird. It does not feel artificial at all, and he wonders why her cheeks are gradually getting even redder and wonder why she smells so sweet. He thinks that there are only 3 possible theories for this situation. He looks horrified as he explains that the first theory might be that a version upgrade suddenly got implemented and something evolved so the game can't be distinguished from reality. The second theory is that this is just a major prank and this is actually reality and someone is cosplaying as Reeve. And the third theory is that a theme that became popular recently in comics with a main protagonist gets thrown into a world similar to games exactly like an Isekai transfer. He realizes that this might be the case and immediately stands up, and Reeve gets worried and exclaims that she should call the 3rd Division captain quickly so that they can heal him. He tells her that there is no need for that, and he tells her to leave to gather information. Reeve nods as she tells him to take care of himself as she turns around to leave. Hellion huffs out of breath as he goes for emergency logout, and he gets no reaction. Her slumps down like a sad cat and disappointed that didn't get its food on time. He looks to the sky and walks around solemnly, reminiscing about the past when the game was recently released and how excited he felt that morning. That day it was where his adventure began. That was the only thought in his mind back then, but now it has gained a new meaning at this point in his life. The online SRPG game he plays is called Tactics Chronicle. It is a very different game from other war games, and the hero have 0 combat powers. All their physical abilities are equal to lower than that of humans in the real world. Only the subordinates are strong, the kings are the weakest. Every commander bows before him as Reeve announces that by his order, they all have showed up before him. He sits on his throne and tells them to raise their head. He calls on Balin to explain the anomalies that have been occurring, and Balin, the 2nd Division commander, stands up to exclaim that there have been no problems with security. Even though several people were injured, the citizens gained their composure back immediately. Balin is a character that has the trait called chivalric spirit, as well as the disciplined character. He is the most suitable person to be trusted with maintaining the order in the kingdom. Hellion thanks Balin for his help and moves on to hear the report of Eltina, the 3rd Division's commander. The elf lady tells him that all the injured people have been cured and treated by her unit, and she also noticed something while she was inspecting the capital's barrier. It turns out the main road that should extend it out from Outer Wall's main gate has disappeared, and the outside of the city has been completely covered by a forest. Eltina has the special ability called the Holy Spirit Order, and her character traits are compassion and dignity. Since there is some sort of illusionary magic in the forest, Hellion assumes that they are not known to the outside world. Their current goal is to investigate the current situation and gather information about the surrounding area as quickly as possible. He orders them to be extremely cautious in going about the investigations. He asks Reeve whether the 4th Division unit, which consists of elite magicians, can break the forest's illusion effect, and Reeve explains that the report from the 4th Division says that it will take some time to figure it out due to the unknown magic and different system. Reeve has the brave character trait, and she is the commander of small elite unit called the Guard Forces. The main mission is to assist the king in various fields and also the Supreme Commander who oversee all the 8 divisions. Reeve tells him that the magic can be reversed using brute force, but Hellion tells her that brute force is not allowed and doing so would end up exposing their existence. Reeve says that she has relayed the message to the commander where she called her a muscle brain. Hellion is confused as to why she would be talking to other commanders like that. Reeve appears dignified as usual, but her tail, which is standing up on guard, tells another story. The only reason that he is looking at the behavior of his subordinates so closely is because rebellion is a thing in this game. He wants to figure out whether someone is trying to rebel against him, and that is why everything is going wrong. The rebellion occurs when their loyalty decreases and their happiness also remains extremely low. They might incite a rebellion, and if that were to be the case, then the war would be between them and the king, who is weak as a human in real life. He shakes his head and tells them that they can leave if they want to. Suddenly, the commander of the 6th Division, Camilla, speaks up. She tells him that if he orders them to keep a low profile, they will follow his orders, but there is a problem if he tells her to investigate the forest. Hellion suddenly perks up at what she was talking about. Camilla led her unit during the Cold War with other countries, and it is unrivaled in information gathering. Camilla apologizes for displaying her lack of power, and she tells him that the 6th Division has never explored unexplored areas and she has no confidence in accomplishing the mission he has put upon them. Hellion realizes his mistake and miscalculations and says that her concern is really valid and that he appreciates her being honest with him. He thinks to himself that he needs to act like a king. He exclaims out a new order which says that Balin shall stay in the kingdom and maintain the order, while Reeve and Altina are going to be exploring the areas that have not been explored yet. Hellion decides to raise their spirits a bit further and assures them that they can do it without any difficulties because they are much stronger now than before and they have done this task before. The only difference is that this time Balin will not be accompanying them. Both Reeve and Altina jerk at that, and he notices that they both look more nervous than before. Thinking nothing of it, he dismisses them. When the four of them walk back, as Camilla sighs as she marvels with her voice laced with love about how elegant her lord the king is. If she could, she would have stayed a bit longer to talk to him. After all, it has been about 3 years since she had an audience with her lord. Balin tells her that it can't be helped since the other commanders have a stronger personality and only the first 3 commanders are allowed to stay in the capital. Camilla hemps as she says that he might not be aware because he is a man, but Reeve's hobbies and tastes are nowhere near decent. The same goes for Altina as well. Suddenly, Altina shows up with a smile on her face, seeming like she has heard what Camilla was saying. She asks her what she means. Camilla tries to play it off as she says that it was nothing major, but Altina tells her to kneel. Camilla hesitates at first, but when Altina tells her to kneel again with a voice that seems to be suggesting that if she does not listen, then she's going to pay for it. She immediately kneels down and Altina asks her what she meant when she said it's probably the same for me as well. Camilla stutters that thought Altina likes women, so that is why she said it. Altina smiles as she says that it is a misunderstanding, and that she likes men like any other girl likes men, but she also likes to cuddle with cute girls. Camilla says that there is nothing normal about what she said, and Altina keeps trying to tell her that she is, in fact, normal, and that there was a time when Hellion muttered something like that too. Altina says that there is nothing cuter than a girl who is on the verge of tears, and Camilla calls out for Balin to run away from this conversation, but finds that he nowhere to be seen. Balin is with Reeve. He asks her why she has been quiet this entire time, and Reeve tells him that the investigation of exploring the outside kingdom feels a little off when Hellion said those words out loud. Suddenly, the room goes quiet before Altina speaks up that she thought the same as well. Camilla also agrees, relieved that she was not the only one to feel that way. Reeve confesses to Altina that she made Hellion kind of mad when the forced transfer occurred, but Hellion has always been a good king and will continue to be a good king. She exclaims that all they have to do is listen to his orders, and Reeve exclaims that they will become his power that opened the path. Altina smiles and says that it was not wrong to be concerned for Hellion, and Reeve explains that all she wanted was for this to get off her chest. Hellion sighs to himself, lost in his thoughts as he recalls the events of before. He exclaims to himself that he messed up even though he was trying to act like a king. He made so many mistakes. However, now that he has decided his next course of action, he decides to head to the North Gate and observe the things with his own eyes. And sees soldiers upon soldiers lined up. He thinks that it is too flashy to send off only 2 commanders, and suddenly his robe is being taken off of him and a change of clothes is happening before he can even process what is going on. Both Reeve and Altina say that the 2 of them will protect him with their life. This confuses Hellion even more because it seems like the king is going off to the expedition himself. It was not what he meant when he ordered it. He tries to recall what could have been misunderstood and remembers that he did say something like the expedition being the same as before with the exclusion of Balin. That must mean they thought that he was also going to go on the expedition like the last time. He tries to act cool when he says that this takes him back, and he hates himself for being like this. The 3 of them step forward to their new adventure. They have been traversing through the forest for an hour, and the scenery has not changed at all. The forest is really dense, and the illusion effect is also there for them to deal with. It feels as though he has lost his sense of direction in this thick forest. Suddenly, the scenery changes around them a little, and it seems to be the start of a normal forest. Eltina tells him that the illusion seems to be weaker now, and it was a boundary line between a normal forest and the illusion. He walks forward, but Reeve is on alert, and she notices that something is coming their way. Suddenly, a huge beast that looks like a wolf or a fox shows up and growls at them. The three of them don't flinch as Reeve stands in front of Hellion to protect him from any harm. Hellion notices that the 5-meter-tall wolf seems to have hostile intent, and that this must be their first strong monster that they are going to encounter. Reeve goes into action and attacks the wolf, making it turn back and leave. Hellion feels proud that his assistant is strong enough to fight easily against that big monster. After all, he raised her with great care compared to the wild wolf. Suddenly, Altina exclaims that she noticed something approaching them from the northeast side, and Hellion suddenly opens the tactical window to open the map and sees 2 white dots, indicating that the entity is unknown. It seems like one of the 2 dots is leading the way to them. Eltina tells him that she can fear a faint scream from the one in the front. Hellion tells them that they need to hurry and arrive there. The 3 of them rush forward and notice a hooded figure rush forward trying to escape from Black Dog that chases after her while growling, clearly looking to prey upon them. The hooded person screams in fear as she shuts her eyes close, thinking it is the end for her. Suddenly, Ryu shows up in front of her and wraps the guy in vines. He immediately questions what the deal with the vines is, and Hellion tells him that they do not wish to fight and they are just protecting themselves. Hellion tells him that this is the only time he is being let off the hook and tells the elf man to go away and not bother them again. The elf man exclaims profanities, calling Hellion just a mere human, and that he does not have the authority to order him around. He exclaims that he is the hunter chief of Noble Wood. Hellion stops him, saying that he does not care who he is. He tells him once again to leave or this entire situation is going to turn into a big deal. The elf man notices Altina and Reeve standing on guard, waiting for Hellion to give them the sign to attack him. He gives up and turns to leave. Hellion thinks to himself that it was dangerous, and he almost got killed by the elf man in the hood. The girl that was running away comes up to Hellion and thanks him for saving her from the elf man, and he says that he is glad that the girl is not hurt or anything. He pauses as he thinks back to how he ordered Reeve to stop as if he was her superior right in front of this girl, and that is going to ruin their disguise as being simple travelers. He tells the girl that the 2 of them are just his bodyguards, even though he is just a handyman that can't fight at all. The girl stares at him with a dumbfounded look on her face and immediately bursts into laughter. Hellion looks at her with confusion as to why she is laughing, and the girl apologizes for suddenly laughing and says that Hellion is acting so tough in front of the male elf, but he seems to be troubled in front of someone like her. She introduces herself as Lifa and thanks him for saving her, and Hellion tells her not to worry because they were also just protecting themselves and that there is no need to thank them. The girl bows to show gratitude, saying that she is so asks him something and asks for his name. He stares for a bit and smiles as he walks up to her, apologizes for not introducing earlier, and says that he is Hellion. The 2 of them shake hands and walk ahead together. Hellion asks Lifa who that elf was from earlier, and she explains that her country's name is Latiswood, and it is just a city-state with 1 city and few settlements. It still feels like a safe haven, and around 30 years ago or so, a half-elf built the country. Apparently, 100 years ago, an interspecies war broken out between elves and humans. The elves were winning battles thanks to their surprise attack, but they were overwhelmed by a large number of humans, so the elves experienced the humiliation of defeat after defeat. Because the elves kept getting pushed back by the humans, they had to retreat to the Great Forest, after which the war seemed to end. She asks him what he thinks happened to the captured female elves that were captured during the 5 years before the ceasefire, and suddenly the 3 of them have a serious look on their face. She continues that the elves have beautiful features from the perspective of humans. They took them in as spoils of war and retreated for personal pleasure. After the ceasefire agreement, most humans gave back the elves, but most of the elves were already pregnant. Those elves were her ancestors, even though it's been only 4 generations since then. The half-elves are not accepted by the elves, and it's only natural that they don't like humans. They must feel disgusted towards the half-elves, and that is how the hate towards the half-elves started. Hellion asks what the reaction of humans was, and she tells him that they treat half-elves better than elves, and there were no elves that treated in a favorable way, but the humans that visited the forest treated them kindly. Hellion understands now that the elves from Noble Wood and attacking the half-elves from Latest Wood. She agrees as she says that they only want to be at peace, but 3 weeks ago, the forces from Noble Wood attacked them suddenly, but they don't know for what reason they were attacked. They simply exclaim that they are going to govern the city in a correct way by the guidance of noble bloodlines. However, she does not believe in any of that. Hellion wonders maybe they were trying to claim more territories to fight against the humans. Maybe he will have a chance to win against the humans, but it would still be difficult. There should not be any difference in the strength compared to the past. She exclaims that if they wanted to claim the territory, then they would try to chase after the half-elves who escaped like herself. Hellion says that the elves attacked because they were after the king or their leader. Lifa tells him that the queen is the leader of Latestwood, but both the queen and prince consort went missing. She was not as good as the elves at using magic, but she was an influential person who united everything and even founded the country. Lifa thinks that she has probably been captured by the elves. Hellion thinks how not only their capital was taken over, but their leader is also missing. They are really on the bad side of losing the war. The only way to deal with this situation is if all half-elves who manage to escape or gather and form an alliance with other forces to initiate a counterattack. Lifa tells them to wait for her as she goes back to the settlement to tell the people about Hellion and others, otherwise they will be too shocked to see them. Hellion agrees to waiting and Altina notices that it is a magic circle and tells him that they should be on guard just in case. Lifa uses the magic spell to open the magic circle up as the gateway to her settlement. Hellion wonders if she is using a summoning magic. He has never heard of a chant like hers. Suddenly, a figure emerges from the magic circle that immediately asks if Lifa is okay and suddenly raises her weapon towards Altina, when she notices that Altina is an elf. Lifa calls out to the woman Wenli to lower her weapon and that they are the travelers who saved her life. Showing hesitation, Wenli lowers her weapon when she realizes that Lifa is serious about it. Hellion thinks it's weird that someone so old is listening to the orders of someone so young. Lifa apologizes for the behavior Wenli showed to them and Hellion asks her for her full name. Lifa smiles and says that she is Lifa from Latestwood. As an individual as well as a member of royalty, she welcomes them into their settlement. Lifa informs them that walking a bit further will be their settlement. Hellion stutters as he nods in agreement to following her, not failing to notice the soldiers on the trees keeping watch on him. The soldiers talk among themselves, surprised that Lifa is letting strangers enter their settlement, a human with an elf at that. Even though Lifa said that they are her saviors, it still feels like something risky. They trust that she must have good reason for doing this. They walk to the settlement and see a bunch of tents with people going about their daily life. They all gather around Lifa when she comes back. She introduces the three of them as her saviors and announces that as anyone disrespecting them will be the same as disrespecting her. People watch from the sidelines without much retaliation and whisper among themselves about Altina being an elf and that the commander is a human as well. Hellion stares blankly at his surroundings, feeling like a panda in a zoo. Apparently, Lifa is the queen's first daughter and in line of succession to the throne since the current queen is missing, so she is acting as the interim queen. It thinks that the only reason someone so important like her was all alone in the forest was probably because she wanted to rescue the queen. He asks her this, and she nods and tells him that noble wood elves are capturing their people instead of killing them. That is why she believes that her parents are still alive and she tried to sneak in with an elite team and rescue them. Hellion asks why she ended up being alone in the forest. She tells him that the rescue plan failed and the enemy found out about them before they crossed the city walls. They ended up retreating without achieving anything. The rest of her team got captured to allow her to escape. Suddenly, Wenli stands up to get a chance to speak up and exclaims that Hellion has been asking a lot of questions instead of showing courtesy towards Lifa. She gets suspicious whether they are actually travelers or not because there is no reason for him to be asking so many questions. Both Reeve and Altina glare at the woman, but before they can retaliate, Hellion signals them to step down and tells the woman that he understands her concerns for suspecting them. He tells her that they are indeed travelers. Whether they are normal travelers is up for debate, however. He explains that they came from the Abyss. Everyone is in shock and wonder if he is the Demon Lord's subordinates. He tells them that this is the first he has heard of that and explains that they were suddenly thrown into an unknown forest while they were exploring an old castle. They wandered the forest for 5 days. When the woman asks why they have no luggage if they travel for 5 days, Hellion turns to Reeve and Altina, and they reveal the luggage that they are carrying with them. Reeve starts to throw in the contents from the pouch into the pot. People start to question who it is. They make assumptions on who it could be. It could be one of the travelers Lifa mentioned. Reeve takes the name of the ingredients as she pours them in. Lighting a fire from just her words, the pot starts boiling. People become amused at the smell of the food. A child approaches Reeve, mistaking her for a dog and asking if the food is ready. Reeve tells her that she is not a dog and that the food is almost done. She asks if the girl wants a taste, then takes a spoonful for her. The girl has a taste of the stew, instantly likes it. Reeve pours a bowl for the girl. She tells the girl that she can have it as it was an order from Hellion. The girl gives her gratitude to the divine tree, but word gets around quickly. People start to approach Reeve for the pot of stew. A girl calls out for everyone to come have a meal, claiming it tasted better than the food at the castle. Hellion observes the people. It was as he thought. The people were not eating well and there was a food shortage. They accepted too many people. The settlement could not handle this amount. A shortage was bound to happen. Lifa comes and thanks Hellion for the food. He says he only wants to help in any way he can. Hellion asks her about a story of a demon lord in the abyss. She answers positively. Lifa tells him that according to the elves, the abyss is a place where the demon lord used to live. There were more legends like this, one being of the lost forest where rare beings appeared, another of the forbidden realm. The abyss was considered the forbidden land. Even without such legends, the elves would not approach the abyss. A demon beast would come out from the abyss from time to time. A very strong one, able to defeat all the other beasts in normal forests. She tells Hellion that there were even units formed to subdue the beasts, but most of them failed. Hellion asks what happened to the beasts that were not subdued. Lifa tells him that they would just go on a rampage, then return to the abyss. For the people living in the forest, the beasts were a sort of natural disaster. They could only wait for them to return to the abyss. Hellion thinks to himself, why did the half-elves build their city in such a dangerous place? He could not ask this question as it would be foolish. Perhaps it could be due to the persecution that they built their city there. Hellion asks her if any other race would approach the abyss intentionally. She tells him that adventurers did approach it. Hellion asks more about the adventurers. Lifa says there are rare materials in the abyss. That is why they approached the abyss. Among them were high-ranking adventurers as well. They would intentionally search for demon beasts, since these beasts had a ton of magic power. The adventurers would craft them into special materials. Hellion wonders if there would be a lot of adventurers visiting Lacewood. The elf did not understand why they would. She tells him, however, that they traded valuable currency. Hellion thinks that circulating only their own currency would limit growth. He did not see any adventurers at the time. Lifa tells him that a month ago a demon horde attacked a nearby city. An emergency call was made, so they went there to deal with the demons. The elves from Noblewood attacked them 3 weeks ago as well. It was right after the adventurers left. Just their luck. Hellion asked about the border city. Lifa says that it is a human frontline city built on the border. This border separates the human and the demon territory. They also called it the Shield of Humanity. Hellion thinks again he had expected such a story. Demons also existed in Tactile Chronicle. He thinks even the 6th Division commander, Camilla, was basically a type of demon. However, he had never heard of a demon territory. Hellion wanted to ask more questions, but his brain would explode with all this info. Reeve looks over to Hellion as he sips from a cup. The food was well received by the people. He notices some kids looking a little different. He asks the elf if they were kids. She tells him that they are small because they are born from halflings. There were a lot of different species. Many of them were half-species too. However, he did not expect dwarves to be there too. Dwarves did not like elves. He asks if they also hated the half-elves. Lifa explains that various species helped to build Lake Testwood. They were a weak bunch of people, no one to rely on. However, that is why they worked together. Lifa tells Hellion that they built this country by working together. Hellion compliments the place. Lifa considers the country her pride and joy. After that, until Reeve finished giving out the food, Hellion continued talking to Lifa. He was worried that Lifa would ask him to lend Reeve and Altina to her. To his relief, she did not talk about that. Hellion and Lifa continued their small talk. Favorite food, color, hobbies, and stories from her childhood. Hellion thinks of Lifa's strength. She was still smiling despite the hard time. He thinks if he was put in the same situation, he probably could not act the same. Lifa goes on to help clean up with Reeve. Hellion brings up his chat window with the 2nd Division Commander Balin. He thought they would not be able to communicate past the abyss. Other people could not see the window, which he could. To them, he was just looking up at the sky. Hellion sends a message, saying how he has contacted the locals and asks if things are okay. The people seem to be satisfied. However, just then, a cup falls and alerts everyone. Hellion is starting to sweat. Lifa begins to ask him. However, he cannot tell her. A rebellion can occur if the people's happiness remains extremely low and their loyalty decreases below a certain level. In the game, a rebellion can occur. Hellion looks up at the window. A rebellion had occurred. The commander, Guardy, defends against the enemy. He makes fun of the weak enemy. Bro is literally him. Guardy wants to be entertained by these weak foes before the supreme leader arrives. Hellion abruptly decides to lead to help with the rebellion. Reeve quickly jumps and carries Hellion. She apologizes for carrying him this way, but it was the only way to get there quickly. Hellion gets a message. The message asks to defend the throne and not let anyone touch it. He needs to stop anyone from getting to it. If the rebels got hold of it, the kingdom's happiness and morale would go down. That he would not be able to use the king's abilities like the function window. It would be fatal if that was taken away from him. The rebellion occurred in the capital city. If they get to the throne and fulfill other requirements, the revolution would be a success. This would be the end of the kingdom. Hellion becomes worried. A successful revolution meant game over. The kingdom would enter a ruined state. The data of the ruling player would be deleted. Hellion starts to worry what would happen to him. Would he die too? Even though he was in a dream. He wanted to be reassured that he was in a dream. A big fight has broken out between soldiers. The 5th Division commander, Gardy Bergelmir, makes quick work of the enemy. He analyzed the easy enemies and mocks them. Gardy was not fazed by the weak enemies and wanted someone strong. As Hellion and Reeve almost reach the castle, he asks Eltina if she hears any fighting from inside the castle. She tells him that the castle is safe. The fight was only in the bazaar for now. Hellion orders Reeve to head to the castle immediately. Hellion and Reeve drop into the castle. He tells her they are going to the throne room. The soldiers shout. The king had arrived. Hellion asks Balin for a status update. He asks if anyone had touched the throne. Balin assures Hellion that no one had gotten past to the throne. Hellion begins to think. Who was the traitor? He had suspected the 5th Division commander to be a traitor. If Balin was a rebel, he would have already taken the throne. In the same way, Reeve and Eltina were allies as well. He starts to think of the other commanders. Some of them had selfish and arrogant character traits. Someone had chaos in their nature tendency too. Eltina had a harmony nature tendency. She would resolve conflicts between subordinates. However, someone with a chaos tendency would make decisions without caring for others. Among the 8 commanders, there was even one with an evil tendency. Knowing that they need to fight the rebels, Balin was handling his 5th unit and a part of 6th on his own. The other commanders were also following Hellion's orders. Hellion becomes confused. Who caused the rebellion? Balin tells him. It was the Ogre faction. The same ogres who attacked them before the nation-founding celebration festival and who surrendered. In the fight, Camilla complains of Gardy using her subordinates to destroy the surroundings. Gardy claims this way they would not attack ever again. Meanwhile, a figure approaches the fight. Hellion sighs at the situation. Balin becomes concerned. Hellion just says he's a little tired. He thinks to himself that he was just worrying too much. Back when Reeve was carrying him, he held on to her tightly. That is why he felt extra tired. Balin notices Reeve seem happy. He asks her why. She yells back at him. A rebellion had occurred. She could not be happy. What made him think she's happy? Balin tells Hellion that the rebellion had ended. He asks to check out the city. Hellion wanted to raise the ogre's loyalty by holding a festival, but it got suspended. The king was absent as well when the people were restless. It was bound to happen. The non-intellectual ogres would have eventually rebelled. Hellion thinks of the gruesome details in front of him. The unallied ogres. The expression should have been regulated. This was just too realistic. Hellion meets with Gardy. Gardy tells him that he had dealt with the rebels. Hellion praises him for his good work. Gardy acts humble and tells him that it was partly his fault that a rebellion had occurred. As such, he was prepared for his punishment. Hellion disagrees as Gardy had protected the kingdom. Hellion asks of the leader. Gardy tells him that the leader is on the floor there. Hellion approaches the subdued leader. It was a gross image to look at. However, in a way, Hellion had wanted this. Reeve approaches Gardy. She tells him that the way he addresses King Hellion was not proper. Gardy tells her that Hellion had allowed him to talk to him in that way. He asks her why she was mentioning it just then. Reeve tells him that there is a place for him to do so. He needs to keep up some respect. Gardy agrees and tells Hellion he's leaving. Reeve tries to stop him. Eltina shows her harmony trait. She tells them not to fight. Hellion shouts at them to not fight either. Just then, the ogre leader comes to life. He jumps to attack Hellion, who is guard down. Reeve runs towards Hellion to protect him. In Tactics Chronicle, the king is the weakest in existence. That is why he could not let anyone hit him at close range. He was already defeated when he let someone surprise attack him. A million thoughts go through Hellion's head. He was certain this was the end. He did not want it to be his end. The ogre strikes a blow at Hellion's head before Reeve could get to him in time. Hellion is thrown to the side. Everyone watches. Tears leave Reeve's eyes. She sees what has happened. Thus, the king was no more. The weakest king, Hellion, was rebelled against by his own citizens and met his end. It was a dream, it seemed. Hellion had some idea it was. Enemy approaching in large numbers, with multiple races joining forces to overthrow the king. While the king did not have many forces, only 3 pieces left among the seats, 2 of which were already broken. The only remaining piece was a beautifully made wolf piece. There was no chance of winning. Hellion thought of Tactics Chronicle as a dream world, which was why he pursued romance, trained his friends, and followed his ideals. Hellion humbled the strong and saved the weak. This king had brought peace to the land. He helped his neighbors, and the result of that was the end of his dream. It was the end for him. Impossible to turn it around. Even though the last piece was strong, it was no match for the hordes of enemies. Hellion was already prepared for such an end. He had destroyed other countries and forged 150 years of history while thinking someday his end would come. When his end came, he wanted to accept it wholeheartedly. However, when it happened, Hellion was terrified. He could not do anything but scream. Hellion's beloved garden should not have had such gruesome things there. Everything was supposed to be a fantasy, a fun game. As Hellion raised his head, he saw a blood-stained weapon raised over him about to crush his skull. Just then, Hellion wakes up in his bed. Startled and confused, he looks at everything around him. Reeve is sitting beside his bed. Hellion is surprised to be in his room. Reeve is just as surprised to see him wake up. Hellion notices her as Reeve gets teary that he is finally awake. He cannot believe that it was a dream. It seemed too real to be one. Hellion tries to recall what happened. He was walking to the place where the rebels were dealt with. He remembers what happened. The ogre attacked him. Hellion was certain he was finished there. How was he awake again? Hellion starts asking Reeve about everything full rapid fire. She asks him to calm down. Reeve tells him not to strain himself as he was sleeping for more than half a day. Hellion could not believe it. He did not remember sleeping at all. Hellion started to connect the dots. If his memory was right, it was not actually a dream. He asked Reeve if he was finished off by the ogre. She answers yes. Hellion then realizes what is going on. The auto-revive function was still working. In Tactics Chronicle, demise of the king did not mean game over. The king could revive, but to a limit, and he would have certain penalties. In simple terms, Hellion had been finished off and revived again. He asked Reeve about the safety of the throne and what had happened to the Red Ogre. Reeve reassures Hellion that the throne is safe. A 2nd Division's elites were guarding the room. She tells him that the rebels had been eliminated. Reeve explains the rebel leader. That ogre had a unique skill. The skill Last Stand activates after being finished off. It deals a critical hit to the person closest to him. Guardy had subdued him at that time, which is why Altina and Reeve dropped their guards. However, Hellion had carelessly approached the ogre with that unique skill. Reeve quickly apologizes for her carelessness. She says it was her duty to protect him and she failed. Reeve yells out, asking for her punishment. Hellion cannot see Reeve in this way. She is bowing down to him. He asks her to come closer and sit on the bed. Reeve obeys and sits. Hellion stretches his hand out. Reeve is teary from her failure. She moves closer as Hellion's palm is on her head. He pats the fox girl's head. Hellion wipes her tears as well. He takes note of her changing feelings. Reeve's cheeks getting red, her smell, her heartbeat, as well as her slightly salty tears. A weirdo for tasting her tears. Hellion figures there is no army approaching. He thinks there is no one attacking the throne. All the commanders were alive as well. The country was safe. It was all a dream. However, this one is not. Hellion starts asking Reeve if there were any problems other than the ogres. Reeve is startled and confused. He tells her to calm down first. Her answers were not consistent. She calms down a little. Reeve tells Hellion that there were only smaller issues, but nothing that would threaten the kingdom. Hellion asks of the commanders. She tells him they are doing their duties as ordered. Altina and Guardy were managing their own divisions. They wanted to hear about Hellion's condition. Hellion passes an order. He wants Guardy to maintain public order. If another rebellion broke out, he wanted him to take decisions on his own. Reeve is surprised but obeys. Hellion tells her that the rebellion came from Guardy's area. Despite that, no one could have predicted the ogre rebellion. Even though Hellion knew ogres were disloyal, he could not afford to lose any more people. Hellion orders for Altina to repair the buildings and treat the wounded people. They needed to communicate better. Hellion also orders everyone to adapt to the situation without disobeying orders. The weak king was finally taking charge. He orders Balin to set the security of the throne back to normal mode as the rebels had been suppressed. Hellion starts to get hungry. Reeve says she will send someone with food right away. In this place, there's a term called role-playing. It means to act out the settings one made. Hellion realizes that since he is a king, he cannot speak in a careless manner. No more brain rot for this guy. However, Hellion or Misaki Tsukasa liked to roleplay. He's starting to sound like a Discord mod. Hellion thinks it was good to learn all the manners because he wanted to roleplay as a king. Food is set on the table for him. He asks the person to leave, saying Reeve is all he needs. He sips from the cup. It was delicious for once. It did not taste that way in Tactics Chronicle. This further confirms Hellion's suspicion. It was most definitely reality. He thinks that too many impossible things have happened over the past 24 hours. Even though he cannot believe that this could happen, he is beginning to accept that this was reality. In such a case, Hellion thinks of a goal. His goal was to return to his original world. Hellion further thinks of it. He wanted to go home and leave this place. Hellion spent a lot of his youth playing this game. However, he enjoyed Tactics Chronicle as a game only, which is why he wanted to return home. There is too little information to figure out why he is here. He was in another world, but he could not figure out the difference. Hellion could still use the Windows system features: tactical menu for combat support and info, reference menu for data sharing, chat menu for communicating with others. Lastly, home menu for log reports and camera. Other people could not see these windows. Only Hellion was able to. Data sharing was working fine too. Hellion thinks of the revive-friendly option. In this game, monsters could be revived, but only after fulfilling a ton of conditions. Firstly, only the people of the kingdom could be revived. Secondly, he would need to know the monster's full name. Third, he could only revive someone who was gone in the last 24 hours. Lastly, there was a limit on how many times the monster could be brought back. The reboot van could only revive them twice. However, it was a skill issue to be gone that many times. Hellion only knew some things. The kingdom was surrounded by a dangerous forest called the Abyss, and that they were in the middle of a war between Lacewood and Noblewood. Hellion is starting to get worked up. He only found 2 other forces in the kingdom's surroundings so far. How strong were the other countries compared to the Alchemera kingdom? Hellion could not ignore internal affairs either. A rebellion had already occurred once. This could not happen again. He needed to think of a way to prevent this from happening. Hellion thinks to himself, if another rebellion happened, people can be resurrected only a few times. The king was no different. Hellion's max lives were up to 6. After that, it was game over. Since he died once, it was at 5 now. Real skill issue from the king. In Tactics Chronicle, losing all lives meant game over. Game over would mean the player's data being erased forever. His thoughts trail off as he thinks of when he will lose all lives. Later, Hellion talks to Reeve as he looks out the window. He tells her that he will ask her a strange question, but she should answer. Reeve agrees. Hellion asks her, what does she think of weak beings? Reeve is confused by Hellion's question. He gives an example, someone like Lifa. He asks Reeve how she feels about her. Reeve answers that she feels Lifa was strong. Hellion says he thinks Lifa's combat power was much lower than Reeve's. Reeve admits that it was true. She tells him that if they fought, she would win. Even if Reeve and Lifa fought 1,000 times, Reeve would win. Lifa knew this as well. Reeve, however, tells Hellion that she did not become a beta for them. Lifa treated them as equals. Reeve continues, when they reached the village, Lifa looked exhausted. However, she kept managing the people without taking any rest. Despite that, they were forced into an unwanted war. The people did not lose hope, even though their strength was inferior. Lifa played a big role in managing people's morale and happiness. Despite having a weak body, she still stood up straight and strong. Reeve admired this about Lifa. Due to these reasons, Reeve considered her people to be strong. Hellion thinks of Reeve's words. Lifa had a strong way of being. In Tactics Chronicle, if you were strong, you lived. If you were weak, that was the end. Hellion tells Reeve that despite this, she is still stronger than Lifa. He asks her to think of her as someone inferior to her. Reeve disagrees. Hellion becomes frustrated and asks why. Reeve tells him that she is a citizen of Alchemera. She was also a weak monster in her early days. Hellion did not abandon her and raise her that way. Reeve tells him that treating others as inferior would be disrespectful towards Hellion. Thus, she could not adhere to the law of the jungle. She would follow the law Hellion made for Alchemera. In the game, rebellions can occur. The Ogre Rebellion was dealt with easily. However, if the citizens find out that the king is weak and unfit to rule, there would be another rebellion. The kingdom would perish if the commanders were to rebel. Doubting everyone all the time was not right. Hellion thinks he shouldn't be suspicious of his subordinates all the time. Doing so, the kingdom would surely fall. After these thoughts, he finally decides Hellion will trust Reeve. He would trust her, no matter what happens. If a day comes that she betrays him, it would be his own fault. Hellion orders Reeve. In 5 hours, he will hold a meeting with the commanders, other than the occupied commanders. He orders her to deliver this message. Hellion tells her he is counting on her. Reeve obeys and wants to please Hellion. A real simp. Reeve leaves. Hellion opens the function window. He sees that the people's happiness was decreasing compared to the last time he checked it. He assumes people were probably stressed because of the teleportation. Hellion thinks the best way to increase happiness was to find the stressor. He could not return to his original world now, nor could he regain the lost areas. Hellion thinks to himself, at this time, it would be better to give a speech to the people and relieve the people of their anxiety. In Tactics Chronicle, when giving a public speech, he only needed to choose the key words. This would be judged as a successful speech. However, Hellion already confirmed that the keywords did not have any effect. He becomes frustrated. Hellion starts to doubt his ability to give a speech and relieve the people. He doubts he could do it without relying on the system. 5 hours later, the commanders reach the hall. The strongest forces, Alchemera's Great 8 commanders, have gathered in the audience hall. All the commanders bow in front of the king. The 1st Division Commander of the Elite Guards, Leave, a fox girl. The 2nd Commander of the Beast Knights, Balin, a buff lion. The 3rd Division Commander of the Holy Spirit Warriors, Altina, an old elf. The 4th Division Commander of the Magic Troops, Sellers, another elf. The 5th Division Commander of the Giants, Guardy. The 6th Division Commander of the Ghosts, Camilla, the Nightmare Empress. The 7th Division Commander of the Mechanics, Robin, a mixed race. The 8th Division Commander of the Dragons, Nograd, the Ragnarok Dragon. All of them bow in front of the king. He thanks them for arriving on a short notice. He called them here to discuss the future policy and current political affairs. The king stands up from his throne and reveals his plans. They are on an unfamiliar island where they have discovered an unknown species of elves and half-elves. He checked on their circumstances. They are truly in an unfamiliar place. The king made sure to check it everywhere. There was no mention of this island in his map. He also checked the window for any information, but he could not find anything. The commanders look at him in confusion. What was Blue talking about even? The king asks if they have any questions. They're free to ask. The 1st Division Commander, Leave, asks him what a map and a window are. King Hellion explains. A window is a space only he can see. A map is a feature of the window. It shows geospatial information. The commanders look at him in awe. Hellion thinks that maybe they aren't aware of his powers. Even so, it is better that they do not know. No one will rebel against him that way. He tells that there's new information from Latestwood, but it is not enough. They do not know of the dangers that lurk around them. It is a very serious matter. The commanders do not speak. Leave is deep in thought. King Hellion calls out to Balin. He wants to know the public's opinion. Balin tells that everyone was panicking when the rebellion started. They calmed down a bit after the situation got better. As a commander, he is worried about the stress levels of the public. His army is not weak, but this situation is very new to them. Balin also says that people will continue to panic until a permanent solution is given. King Hellion thinks. The monsters are after power. Display of power will only cause more panic in the country. Balin speaks again. There is a problem with the residency. The people who live in the capital are not affected. The people who came to celebrate the festival have nowhere to go. All the inns are full and the military camp cannot take more people. King Hellion thinks of a solution. He calls Guardy. Guardy apologizes to him. He let the king die under his watch. He should be punished. Hellion thinks of a punishment. He puts him under the orders of the 2nd Division Commander. They will make housing accommodation for the people. Hellion wonders if the punishment is too much. As king, it is his job to punish people when they do wrong. Guardy is shook. This is nothing compared to the punishment he should get. He asks the king if he is really okay with this punishment. The king punishes Leave and Altina next. For their punishment, they will continue the mission and serve as his personal bodyguards. He will visit Latestwood again to think about what to do. The 4 commanders bow. Leave calls the king. She wants to say something. King Hellion tops her. Latestwood is their only source of information. They need to go here again. He asks if Leave thinks he is wrong. She does not reply. Hellion then calls Camilla. She will also go with them, but she will not be protecting him. She will be the nation's ears. Her job is to gather intel. She will hear all the tea from the residents of Lacewood. Camilla is excited to be of use finally. She can use her specialty. King Hellion tells her that he is relying on her. She is the best at this. Camilla promises to not let him down. Hellion notices the other commanders looking at him in hope. King Hellion thinks Camilla looks very prideful. He understands what the others want. He starts praising them one by one. He calls Leave. She has always been by his side. She is the nation's eyes. He hopes that Leave can keep looking over the kingdom. Balin is the nation's claws. He can tear through the enemies with ease. The future is unclear. Hopefully Balin can help in times of emergencies. Altina can best handle domestic matters. She is the nation's main. Stella is a powerful magician. She can bring down nations with her melodies. She is the nation's tongue. Guardy is the nation's arms. He can tear through any fortress with his strength. His strength is very much needed by the nation. Robin is the nation's feet. He has been the biggest support. In the future, his support and technology will be very useful. Nogard is the nation's wings. With his powers, they rule the battlefield from the skies. Hellion hopes he can continue providing his firepower to the nation. The commanders all agree. Hellion commands them to take action. Their nation needs them, and they will not let it down. In a faraway place, Lilitha is being held captive. Her subjects try to protect her, but the enemy woman kicks her head. Hurting the person will be a good message for the travelers. King Hellion walks with Leave, Camilla, and Altina. Camilla is hugging his arm tightly. Leave tells her to back off. She's pushing his boundaries. Camilla claps back that Leave wants her to suck at her job. Secretly, Camilla is very happy to be in this place. She's pretending to be a weak, helpless maiden who got separated. Leave says that not what she meant. Camilla gives her the shut-up call. King Hillian stops their bickering and commands that they have almost arrived. Leave suddenly notices something. Hillian asks what is wrong. Leave tells that she smells blood in the air. The wind changed direction. She can smell blood from the camp far away. King Hillian commands them to hurry up. Hit rush towards the camp where they see a lot of injured people. Hillian is shocked to see so many casualties. He asks Altina to cure them all. An arrow shoots towards King Hillian. Leave catches it midair and prepares to fight the attackers. Hillian tries to stop her, but it is too late. An injured elf is preparing to shoot down Hillian and his company. She readies her bow and tells them that they cannot fool her. Someone else runs to the elf. It's Lifa. She orders the injured elf, Wenli, to lower her bow. Hillian isn't the enemy and he did not expose them. Lilifa is in danger because of someone else. Hillian asks what happened to Lilifa. Wenli doesn't listen and commands the archers to rain arrows down on them. Lifa takes charge. She reminds Wenli that she is the queen now. They will listen to her orders. The archers step back. King Hillian apologizes. He came at a bad time, but Altina will heal the injured people. Lifa accepts, but she is too worried. Most of her people will not be able to survive. Altina says she has got them covered. She uses her powerful healing rain. The rain falls on the injured people, and they magically heal. Everyone starts to happily jump in the rain. It's a miracle all of them got better so quick. King Hillian asks if there were any casualties. He stops and looks down horrified. So many people lost their lives in this raid. All the bodies are put in a big pile and set on fire. Lifa stares at them hopelessly. People are crying over their lost loved ones. King Hillian stands next to Lifa. The attackers ask them to bring Hillian and his company to them by the next morning. In exchange, they will release Lilifa and the others. Hillian says that he understands the situation. It is a little late to admit, but he is not related to the people of Noblewood. Lifa shares that the elf Hillian previously defeated attacked the settlement. He brought a huge army and they injured a lot of people. He is the chief hunter, Salwin Welt of Noblewood. Salwin is the general of the elf warriors. There are ranks above chief hunter, but in wars, chief hunter commands the elf warriors. Hillian asks why they would want Altina. It was understandable if they wanted the king or Leave who hurt him. But why Altina? Lifa apologizes she doesn't know anything either. Hillian looks at the burning bodies and then at Lifa. He asks if she wants to say something. Lifa bows and begs him to save Lilifa and her comrades. Hillian is sus about her. He asks if she wants to capture them and hand them over to the enemies. Lifa admits that they're too weak to do anything. Even if they did, it will not be good for her. Another tragedy awaits Lifa. Legiswood is no longer a country. The entire military got wiped out. They lost their queen. Their last-ditch effort was to rescue the queen. It was down the drain once Lifa participated. The country has nothing left. Hillian and his party are the neutral party. They are able to drive away the oppressors and aren't racist towards half-elves. Lifa's last hope is Hillian and his comrades. Hillian thinks that he wants to help her. His actions might cause his own people to rebel. He cannot be careless and put his own nation in danger. Hillian thinks for some time. He asks what Lifa can offer in exchange for the rescue mission. Hillian wants a good reason that can convince his own people. Lifa offers herself. She is noble and a virgin. She will sell for a good amount and her blood is valuable. Hillian asks what will happen to Lateswood if she gives herself up. The nation still needs its queen. Lilifa will take over Lifa and prove to be a good queen. Hillian will have full authority over her until she is sold. Lifa begs him to save her people and fully bows to him. Watching her, all the other half-elves bow too. Hillian stares at them in shock. Bowing down to some random traveler isn't something a ruler should do. It shows how weak a ruler is. It is an act of submission. Lifa shouldn't be bowing to him. She's desperate enough to do this. She really wants to save her people. Hillian is the king of Alchimera. He cannot accept something like this out of nowhere. He will be responsible for the lives of all the people he puts on the line. Protecting the people of Latestwood is stupid. They are already on the brink of extinction. It isn't very rewarding to save them either. It will be stupid to help someone else and ignore Alchimera's own problems. Hillian cannot become a foolish king, he thinks. Suddenly, he has a flashback of Leave bowing to him. She was a helpless monster, but Hillian took her in and looked after her. She swears her loyalty to Alchimera and says that Hillian helped him. She will obey the laws of the jungle and the laws of Alchimera. Hillian is shook. This is his eureka moment. He orders Leave, Altina, and Camilla to help the poor people of Lateswood. They have begged for Alchimera's help. He will not deny them. The bases of Alchimera are built by helping the needy. They cannot sit idle in these times. Hillian says that Latestwood still has very helpful spirits that are loyal to this very day. They will help in the long-term prosperity of Alchimera. He asks if anyone wants to object. They can now. All three of the commanders agree. They have no problem with Hellion's orders. He turns to Lifa and asks her to raise her head as the Queen of Lacewood. Lifa is shocked to hear his title. He is a very powerful figure. Hellion apologizes and introduces himself again. He is the king of Alchimera, Hellion Edda Elshanok. He warmly welcomes all of her people and sees her as true allies of Alchimera. They are now brethren. He welcomes them to the otherworldly nation, Alchimera. The people of Alchimera and talking among themselves. The king will give a speech and they will all hear it. People are gathering in the town square. The military are making sure to maintain order so the people get along. Anyone who disobeys them will face the wrath of the 2nd Division Army. Lifa stands at balcony and stares at all the people. Eltina asks her what is wrong. She says that Hellion did not seem like an ordinary man the moment they met. She was us of him from the start. She was surprised to see he rules such a big kingdom. Eltina gives her the backstory. In the beginning of this nation, there was only monsters and King Hellion himself. They had nothing. Even hunting a single goblin was hard for them. They used a dagger they picked off a goblin. It was later reforged into a greatsword the 2nd Division commander, Balin, uses. What Lifa sees today is effort worth 120 years of fighting and hardship. This year, the nation is 150 years old. Alchimera is about to enter a new era. Hellion stands on the stage. Guards are everywhere making sure everything goes smoothly. King Hellion gives his speech. He thanks the people for coming to hear him. They were previously forced to relocate the capital. All of their bases were destroyed and now they are in a completely new world. That is what their investigations say. In this world, they are completely alone. The people who are present here now are the only people left. They make Alchimera now. They have been forced to adapt to this world. The food will not last them a very long time and their number has reduced significantly. They have no one to rely on. They are completely alone. Their power has reduced to 1 by 100 of its original state. The country of Alchimera no longer exists. King Hellion continues his speech. There is no need for them to think that Alchimera does not exist anymore. They came from hard times. The nation was built on the hardships of the people. They got 150 years of progress that made up Alchimera today. Natural disasters, wars, calamities they overcame together. The 8 divisions present here today are proof of their hard work. There is no need to believe that Alchimera does not exist. All the people listening to King Hellion's speech today are Alchimera. Hellion says that if they agree with him, they will roar and respond. The entire crowd starts cheering. Hellion continues his speech. Alchimera is not the only nation under threat. On a walk today, he found the people of Lacewood. They are a weak nation in terms of power, but their ideals match with Alchimera. Lifa looks at Hellion fondly. He continues, the nation of Lacewood was attacked by Noblewood. Noblewood is a supremacist nation who believes only true elves should be called elves. They are very racist. They don't like humankind. They do not like the king's race. They captured and hurt a lot of the people of Lacewood. In return for their queen Lilifa, they demand Alchimera's 3rd Division commander Eltina. King Hellion will not obey these orders. He will fight against the tyrants and monsters to free the people of Lacewood. He will try to negotiate with Noblewood first. If they do not agree, it will be time for war. Noblewood should not be underestimated when it comes to power. To face this nation, he has entrusted this matter to a new monster. That monster is Alchimera. The people of Alchimera make up the monster. King Hellion asks, where are the eyes of Alchimera? The 1st Division responds, they are the eyes. They will see everything on behalf of their great king. Hellion asks, where are the claws of Alchimera that protects its weak loser king? The 2nd Division responds, they are the claws of Alchimera who will shed through enemies to protect the weak. Hellion asks who is the mane of Alchimera. The 3rd Division answers, the mane signifies power on behalf of their king. Hellion asks who is the tongue of Alchimera hat drives away evil to help its king. The 4th Division answers, they protect the king against evil magic. Hellion asks where the strong arms of Alchimera are. The 5th Division answers, they tear through any obstacle that stands in the way of their king. The crowd gets hyped up and starts screaming again. Hellion asks where the ears of Alchimera are that listen in the place of their weak king. The 6th Division answers, they are the ears of Alchimera under the leadership of Camilla. Hellion asks where the supporting feet of Alchimera are that support the weak king. The 7th Division answers. Hellion looks at the sky. He asks where the wings of Alchimera are. The 8th Division dragons fly in the sky. They are the wings of Alchimera who control the skies. King Hellion commands his troops to march forward. They will help their weak king achieve victory and help their fallen allies. Lifa stares at the scene in surprise. In Hellion, she could see a man and a nation that would change the tides of this new world. In a warehouse, an elf lies on a bed. She is covered in bandages. Lilitha cleans her wounds and apologizes. Because of her, their nation was put in this place. Lilitha asks her to stay still or her wounds will reopen. She needs to heal before she can do anything. They've nerfed her down pretty badly. They talk about a queen. She's locked up someplace away from them. They wonder if Hellion will come to help them. Lilitha has her faith in Hellion. He is a reliable person. He helped Lilitha before. He will come again. Someone shouts at the elves. He asks Lilitha to come out the place. She has been with them long enough. Lilitha says goodbye to the others in the room. Hellion walks with his commander. He stares at the map. His speech was awesome and everyone agrees with him. But they do not know the strength of Noblewood. Eltina prepares herself. Hellion asks if she will be okay. They don't have to exchange her. Eltina says that she will be fine. The enemy swore on the name of the Divine Three that they will not hurt her. Anyone who swears on the Divine Three makes a promise. If they do not fulfill it, they are shamed in the world. They are the enemies of all the elves if they don't fulfill their promise. Hellion orders the commander to not launch an attack until he orders them to. The enemy meets them outside the walls of Noblewood. He mocks them and threatens to drag them to the chief hunter Salwyn. Lifa steps forward. She says that she has brought the travelers they requested to free Lilitha. The enemy lets them inside the walls. Hellion looks around him. The city is in ruins. He wonders if this was a nation. The enemy elf asks them to keep moving. They are taken to a place where another person is waiting. He compliments their attitude. Hellion asks if he is the person in charge of making the negotiations. The person mocks them. What negotiations would prisoners make? Hellion tells that he is here on his own free will as requested by Lacewood. He asks why they need a high elf. Is it for magic? He will cooperate depending on the answer the enemy gives. The first step to any fight is negotiation. If the people of Lacewood can be saved without any bloodshed, it will be the best outcome. The enemy laughs. He calls Hellion a useless barking human who does not know his position. He asks Eltina to mock him too. She looks down and says that she trusts negotiations to Hellion. The enemy calls her a powerful elf far superior than himself. She can push anyone to her will. Why does she follow a mere pathetic human? Eltina says that she has different values when it comes to humans. The enemy raises his hand. He says that she has forgotten her place as a high elf. He will gladly remind her. With the command of his hand, a dragon charges from the sky. Lifa stares at the dragon in horror. It has 6 wings. It is the Sylph dragon. They are all royally effed. Lifa screams at the enemy. How did he undo the seal on the dragon? The enemy only laughs. A tainted half-elf knows of the sacred dragon. Hellion asks Lifa what the deal with the dragon is. Lifa lore drops. The dragon has been given to elves by the ancient god. It is only mentioned in poems. He was the savior of the elves in crisis. After all problems were solved, the dragon was sealed back. The enemy mocks them. He gets to the point. The power of the dragon asks for a sacrifice. With great power comes a greater sacrifice. Only a pure blood elf can restore the power of the great dragon. This is why it was sealed in the first place. The people of Noblewood need this power. They will avenge the humans that made them suffer 100 years ago. The dragon is weak. It needs to eat pure-blooded elves in order to gain its true power. Hellion stares at him in horror. For the past month, the captured half-elves were being fed to the dragon. Lifa gasps. She asks where her people and her parents are. The enemy says that the dragon ate them long ago, but they were not nourishing. The human blood in them made it unappetizing. If a high elf is fed to the dragon, it will regain its true power. Hellion panics and screams. He shouts at the enemy to return Lilitha and the others the enemy captured. The enemy made an oath with the Three's name. The enemy laughs. They came here for Lilitha. He throws a sack at them. It falls in front of Hellion. He looks at the remains of Lilitha in horror. This is what remains of Lilitha after the dragon ate her up too. The enemy continues as Hellion stares horrified. The elf only stands between elves of the purest blood. It does not mean anything when it is made with a half-elf like Lifa. The tainted have no need makes such noble promises. Till the very end, Lilitha believed that they will fulfill the oath. It was naive of her. Hellion is shook. He presses a button on his window. No one else can see. They feel the forest bending. Hellion is angry. All he sees now is red. He calls himself stupid for hoping they would negotiate. They are filthy beings who do not count as elves and are even lower than humans. Hellion puts an isolation barrier on Noblewood. The people of Noblewood are pests who he will eliminate. Hellion's army marches forward. The enemy panic. They try to inform the chief hunter. This is not war. This is extermination. Hellion commands his beast of an army, Alchimera, to eliminate every single one of these pests of Noblewood. If you liked the video, please subscribe and give me a like to upload part 2.